What does this water means to you as a young student or a young generation? Water, talk, water. That's all we know, water. I'll call it a lone life, which is a male, it's easterness. And everlasting water, a female water, is it's eastern. A crystal clear water, it's eastern something. You can almost look through that water if it's real clear. And then there's it's not you all heard it, a male rain, a female rain, it's not art. And then there's a water that comes in, what do you call it, artesian, I guess, a spring that comes out of the water. Again, there's two, a male and a female. You go this way. And at the top of that, a water of life.
One thing I always remember is the elders always say, Twa inait, water is life. As Navajos, in our creation stories, the various myths, the various different types of sacred waters is what we are made of. Life cannot exist without water. Animals, plants, anything that's alive on this earth cannot exist without water.
In the Dene way, everything is given an offering to show reverence and respect to sacred things and ceremonies. An offering of tkadadin, corn pollen, or precious stones are made at springs, ponds, rivers, lakes, and the ocean. All water beings are acknowledged by name, as they are the guardians of water. This is how one appeals to the holy water people, to bring moisture in its various forms. Water is used in different ceremonies to achieve and maintain harmony in our journey of life from birth to old age. Today, there are three major water issues that concern the Navajo and Hopi people. The views expressed here are those of grassroots organizations, corporate representatives, tribal leaders, and traditional medicine people.
The Hopi call the San Francisco Peaks the Watukiauvi, which means the place of the snow. And since time immemorial, the Hopis have revered the peaks in many ways. It is one of the more important landscapes in Hopi history and culture. From a religious standpoint, it is known and is revered as a home for the Katina spirits. The whole peaks is a shrine of the Hopi people. In many, many ways, the peaks are important to the Hopi people today. When the Hopi clans emerge into this present way of life, the peaks were the central point of gathering initially. This is where many of the Hopi clans of today received their spiritual instructions.
The wastewater from the city of Flagstaff goes to a treatment plant where it's cleaned up. The organics are taken out of the water. It's treated with ultraviolet light to kill the microorganisms and they call it at that point reclaimed water. As a legal issue from the state of Arizona, that water is allowed to be used in applications like watering lawns and for non-food irrigation.
It's a really fragile ecosystem there. That system has been in place for hundreds of years, thousands of years. Even the smallest amount of percentage of type of contamination can affect, who knows, it might just devastate the whole ecology on the mountain.
And in other regions of the world, it has been documented that this reclaimed water can cause abnormalities in fish and in frogs. So there's ongoing research to see if there's enough of these chemicals in the Flagstaff reclaimed water to have impacts. But there are scientific questions about that very issue. In other words, it's not proven scientifically one way or the other whether that water is quote-unquote safe to introduce into a natural ecosystem.
That sacred mountain is sacred to 21 tribes in the Southwest. They go there for their pilgrimages. They go there for their religious activities. It's like getting sewer water to clean off a church. I mean, it's sacrilegious. It's degrading to our people. The U.S. Forest Service gave permission to the ski industry to expand and develop and make more ski lifts, to cut more trees so people can have fun skiing down our sacred mountain. Within this agreement, there is not one word or one sentence about our cultural beliefs, our spirituality. For the past 25, 30 years, it's like we mean nothing to them, our belief system.
The people don't see, only go for money. How about our life? So I don't want to be destroying the sacred mountain. That's our strong, our church. They heal us. What happened? If the like church burn out, where you going to pray?
Water rights and allocation of water began in the early 1900s when the Colorado River Compact was established, where the upper Colorado Basin would get a certain amount of water and the lower Colorado River Basin would get another amount of water. And this was already set many decades ago. However, the tribes in Arizona and the southwestern areas were left out of this compact, even though at that time there was also another law that was in effect called the Winters Doctrine. And this doctrine stated that any federal lands, which would include reservation, would have a right to certain water that would be beneficial to the use and the needs of that people on the federal lands. Despite this law that was already established, the tribes nevertheless were left out of these water compacts. The tribes are trying to define their water rights. The water right issue, I believe, is just very recent in terms of the tribes exercising their sovereignty and being able to say that they have a right to these water resources.
Here in the state of Arizona, it has been determined through the Supreme Court that water rights are not adjudicated in the federal courts, where you might see tribes, resolving major disputes. Water rights in Arizona are resolved through the state courts. So that's the first rule. There was a more recent lawsuit that occurred here in the state of Arizona, and the Arizona State Supreme Court sort of amended the earlier rule, and they are now saying that tribes as nations can now use the argument that they need sufficient water and water rights so that they can sustain economic viability as a permanent homeland.
We have treaties, so we have access to that water. So now everybody wants the water. So we have to go to court to fight for the water that belongs to us legally.
But the water rights that we're addressing is the Little Colorado River water rights. And the Colorado River Basin, the watershed that flows into the Little Colorado River, which eventually drains into the larger Colorado, includes both Navajo and Hopi land. So we're actually in the lawsuit together with about 1,000 plus other claimants in the Little Colorado River water.
Our emphasis, our focus was, as a group, the Nez Sovereignty Defense Association, was to submit paper water rights to the Colorado River, the upper Colorado River. Rather than focusing on the Colorado River, they've been focusing on the tributary dry water beds of the Nevato, other washes, saying that that's our water rights. The Canyon de Chelly. These are all tributaries of the Colorado River, so we're addressing the Colorado River water rights. The lawyer says we are working on the largest water basin, the San Juan Water Basin, but where is the largest volume of water? It's the Colorado River.
I feel like it's a diversion tactic to claiming the Colorado River. If we were to claim the Colorado River, we would basically control the Southwest politically, because the water is used for agriculture in Southern California, and Southern California provides food for the country. So in that way, also the water is used for energy, and we're into this new century now, and water is the new gold. They want to make a congressional act that says the Navajo Nation has to drop all water suits in exchange for $900 million, or I believe $900 million. That gives up any potential chance of any water claims that to the Colorado River. I think it's all about the future of the Americans, the belly of the beast, to sustain their electricity, the uses, the overconsumption of energy.
But our Navajo Nation government, over the past 80 years, 90 years, that's all they've learned is to give. We are not a piggy bank of America. While our people are the most poorest in the nation, have the worst health care, have the worst economic stability, have no jobs, highest incidence of infant mortality, highest rates of alcoholism, some of the highest rates of domestic abuse, highest rates of mental sicknesses, but most importantly, highest rates of cancer of anywhere in North America.
Every year, I think the Bureau of Reclamation probably generates like about probably $10 to $50 million off of Navajo water, unclaimed water rights.
It's important that we fully define what our resources are. Among them is, of course, our water. So for nations to continue to look out for future generations, we do need to understand what water rights we have. So quantification of our water rights is very paramount.
But Peabody has been operating on tribal lands since 1970, and we operate as a guest of the Navajo Nation Hopi tribe. We have permission to operate through lease agreements, which are legal instruments that are authorized by the Navajo Nation and the Hopi tribe. And our leases give us the right to mine coal, and the leases also give us the right to purchase water for use in the mining. And the water is used, as you know, to convey coal about 273 miles from the Black Mesa mine to the Mojave Generating Station, which is one of our two customers.
I became interested in hydrology as a young child, mainly because I grew up on Peabody land area on Black Mesa, and my family was extremely affected by the mining in which
The explosions actually forced my family westward.
So what's happening, is several environmental organizations, conservation groups have sued Mojave, and the lawsuit states that they have to install new scrubbers in the stacks where the CO2 comes out. And there's all these byproducts of it, like mercury, So Southern Cal Edison, who's owner of the Mojave Generating Station, has to install scrubbers. They don't want to install these scrubbers and reopen back in 2009. They have 3 years to install these scrubbers. Unless the Navajo Nation says that and the Hopi tribe says that they're going to continue to allow Peabody to send slurry, coal slurry to them.
Peabody does not own the Black Mesa Pipeline. That's an independent company that's owned by another company called Northern Borders Partners. So, but the way that the process works essentially is that once the coal is mined, it's ground into a fine powder-like consistency. And then it's mixed with water, and it's sent down the pipeline.
The pipeline is used as a transportation system to the Mojave Power Plant in Laughlin, Nevada. There is a centrifuge system that is in operation that tries to take out as much of the water in the coal as possible. And then once that water is removed, I think they mentioned about 75% of that water is removed from that coal. Then that coal is put into the burners, and that's what then produces the energy. The water that is taken out is used in part for the cooling system, is what they explained. At that point, it is just too dirty to do much of anything else with. So what happens is they're put into evaporation ponds and just allowed to evaporate at that point.
What we looked at was use of the Navajo aquifer, which is a huge, huge aquifer. It spans an area that's the size of Delaware. There have been many, many studies that have been done to assess what the potential impacts would be of using the water, and all of those studies continue to show that we would use less than 0.1% of the total water stored in the Navajo aquifers, and that's during the entire projected life of the mining. The studies show that the aquifer is healthy, and that our use, really won't have any long-term impacts on the resource whatsoever.
Hydrologists say that it's very substantial, that it's affecting the aquifer substantially, while others who've modeled it say it's like taking a dip out of a huge bucket. Especially now that we're in an extreme decade of drought, I don't believe that the rainfall that we get will replenish the amount of water that is used by Peabody. In addition, this aquifer is very deep. It's thousands of feet deep into the ground, and a drop of rain that falls on a recharge area would take years, maybe hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years, for that single drop of rain to reach the aquifer. So one cannot say that every year that certain amount of rain replenishes the amount that was pumped out. The tribe is, as well as other grassroots organizations, are very concerned about this use of water, because it's not very wise to use this type of water for just slurry transportation of coal.
We're working with the Navajo Nation and the Hopi tribe to develop a new resource that's called the Coconino Aquifer. And we would use this, we're looking to potentially develop the resource. The Coconino Aquifer is like 3.5 times the area of the Navajo, and it's the largest and most productive aquifer in what's called the Little Colorado River Basin. One must realize that we are not a sovereign nation. The Navajo Nation and the Hopi tribe are both sovereign nations. And President Shirley himself was quoted in the paper fairly recently saying that we as a nation need to, provide a whole array of infrastructure services to our people: water, electricity, roads, etc. So what I would say is that the $100 million, it's actually over $100 million in direct economic benefits that are being contributed to the Navajo Nation, provides the dollars that the nation can use to build its infrastructure.
Water is life to us. We have songs and prayers for water. We have a holy being called Twitzan, Holy Mother Water, that has an energy that heals. Just like that plant that needs water, we need that water. That water helps us within our spirit. It helps us to clean our body out. It cleans our mind out. All across this whole Four Corners area, mostly in that western area, you don't see springs anymore. Everything's dried up.
Somewhere in life, where you go, in your learning, you might be able to do something for your people. Not only for your people, for this land itself, because a lot of young lives, a lot of young men, women, lost their lives. Sacrificed their lives to protect this Mother Earth, His holiness here. As a grandchildren, as an old man, I'd like to address all of you. As a grandson, a granddaughter, my children. Here without them. Keep it up.
Can you close the door, please?
Not boring you, am I? You're gone.
You can go as far as the road you take, but how can you